cheating millionaire, left his pregnant wife homeless years later. She owned his company. $1 million empire doesn't always guarantee a faithful heart. In a bustling city known for startup dreams and high-stakes deals, a young entrepreneur rocketed to success, eventually gracing an article in Forbes for his unstoppable ascent. Yet, behind his penthouse doors, arrogance and deceit festered. Determined to chase every fleeting thrill, he callously forced his pregnant wife onto the streets, abandoning her without a home or a safety net. Little did he realize fate had laid a cunning trap. Years later, the same woman he thought powerless reappeared, not as a supplicant, but as the new owner of the very company he once lorded over. Keith Anderson was born in a modest Detroit suburb. His parents worked long hours, his father at a small auto parts factory, his mother as a diner waitress. Growing up, Keith could rarely afford new clothes or fancy toys. Yet, even as a child, a flicker of ambition lit his eyes. He'd watch business shows on a tiny TV, mesmerized by CEOs who strode across screens, confident and wealthy. In school, while others daydreamed of vacations, Keith obsessed over the stock market sections of the newspaper. That hunger for success propelled him to a business scholarship at a state university. He juggled part-time jobs and night classes, forging connections with fellow strivers. During this time, he met his soon-to-be wife, Sarah Marshall, a bright marketing major from a middle-class family. Soft-spoken and supportive, she saw in Keith a burning drive for a better life. Early on, they bonded over quick lunches between classes, sharing dreams of one day living beyond paycheck to paycheck. After graduation, Keith took an entry-level job in a financial consultancy, devouring every opportunity to learn. Within a few years, he struck out on his own, launching an investment firm dedicated to real estate flips and small tech startup investments. Business soared beyond expectation. Buoyed by a booming market, he turned a tidy profit. Local media praised him as an up-and-comer, the Detroit dynamo. Feeling unstoppable, Keith moved to a fancier neighborhood, upgraded to a sleek new car, and began hosting high-profile investor dinners. No longer the shy young man who believed any success was a gift, he was now certain that he was destined for greatness. During these hectic times, Sarah remained the calm center in Keith's world, offering quiet encouragement and moral stability. He proposed to her in a simple, heartfelt moment on a dock by a local lake. Soon after, they married in an intimate gathering of close friends. At first, it seemed love and ambition could coexist seamlessly. Keith soared in business, Sarah supported him, and life felt full of promise. Yet, beneath the surface, seeds of a downfall already took root. Each success fed Keith's ego. He craved bigger deals, riskier ventures, a glitzier circle of associates. His gratitude for Sarah's unwavering presence began to fade. He never suspected how that would lead to a betrayal that would sever their marriage and exile. The woman he once claimed to love, pregnant and homeless, from the world he'd built. Nor did he expect that, one day, fate would return her to reclaim everything he flaunted. Keith's early marriage to Sarah glowed with tender moments. Though frequently caught in endless networking events, he always found time for Sunday brunches, quiet evenings on the sofa, discussing future plans. Sarah believed in him wholeheartedly, celebrating every small victory like the day. Keith clinched an important real estate flip in record time. After a few fruitful years, Keith's firm Anderson Ventures made waves in the local business scene. His knack for spotting undervalued properties and managing swift renovations drove up profits. Investors flocked to him, seeing in Keith a relentless hunger reminiscent of bigger real estate moguls. He occasionally grumbled that Detroit wasn't enough, that he planned expansions in Chicago or even Manhattan. As the money poured in, Sarah noticed subtle shifts. Where once Keith expressed gratitude over dinner, he now boasted about how his genius alone secured success. She'd watch him speak with a new arrogance at fundraisers, determined to outshine older, more experienced players. Though proud of him, she quietly worried about the moral toll of racing so fast. Once she overheard him berating an employee for a minor oversight, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard. Still, their home life remained mostly peaceful, the love untainted enough that Sarah believed they could handle any storm. She began dropping hints about starting a family, visions of little ones scurrying through their large suburban house. Keith seemed receptive at first. He liked the idea of a legacy, someone to take over the empire he was building. Yet, whenever Sarah tried to discuss details, he brushed her off, citing urgent deals. Eventually, a big break arrived. A prominent bank from Chicago showed interest in funding Anderson Ventures' expansions. Keith traveled frequently, forging alliances across states. During these longer absences, Sarah realized how lonely she felt. She maintained the household, tracked daily finances, and occasionally joined her own marketing gigs to keep her skills sharp. Meanwhile, Keith's phone calls grew more terse. He boasted about lunches with top-tier investors, praising the buzz around him as if it were an unstoppable wave. The moment she discovered she was pregnant, Sarah's heart soared. She prepared an elaborate dinner, planning a sweet reveal with baby-themed decor. Keith came home late, phone glued to his ear, discussing a property lead in Dallas. But when she finally told him, he broke into a wide grin, hugging her. "We'll make it work," he promised, though his eyes gleamed with a distraction that worried her. She ignored the uneasy knot in her stomach, chalking it up to nerves. No one could have guessed that within months, that vow would splinter. As Keith soared closer to the sun, a new temptation would overshadow Sarah's place at his side. The cost? Everything that once made their marriage a refuge. Keith's expansions brought him to swankier circles dinners in penthouse suites, exclusive charity galas. At one such gala, held at the Westin Book Cadillac in downtown Detroit, he was introduced to Bianca Rollins, a tall, striking blonde with an easy laugh and a reputation for turning heads. Bianca was the niece of a major developer from Chicago. She specialized in marketing high-end properties, earning commissions that dwarfed many salaries. The chemistry between Keith and Bianca sparked instantly. He found her bold ambition and effortless charm both familiar and intoxicating. Bianca's father had mentored her in real estate since she was young. She was no naive socialite, but a cunning professional who recognized opportunity. Keith, sipping champagne, listened eagerly as she described a condo project near a Chicago waterfront. They exchanged business cards, each sensing a mutual advantage. Over the following days, late-night phone calls about potential collaborations meandered into flirtatious banter. Sarah sensed an odd distance forming. Keith started returning home later, citing urgent negotiations. He took calls in separate rooms, phone angled away. The nights when he was home, he seemed restless, scanning real estate listings on his tablet while half listening to her pregnancy updates. She attempted to engage him, to remind him of prenatal appointments, but he waved her concerns aside. "I've got bigger deals to focus on," he'd say offhandedly. Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. Bianca, meanwhile, thrived on Keith's attention. She boasted about her older, wealthy lovers in the past, playfully hinting that she preferred men who aimed high. For Keith, who'd begun to see Sarah's pregnancy as a stifling chain, Bianca represented glamour and excitement. He convinced himself it was just business, just a fling, nothing serious. One night, after a boozy work dinner, Keith found himself at Bianca's apartment near the riverfront. By morning's light, Lines had been crossed irrevocably. He returned home with guilt swirling in his mind, only to see Sarah in the kitchen, preparing baby-themed decor for an upcoming gender reveal. Her glowing happiness tore at him unexpectedly. He sank into denial. This is harmless, he assured himself, rationalizing that no one would be hurt if he played his cards carefully. But secrets rarely stay buried. Over the next weeks, Keith's affair escalated, stolen rendezvous at posh hotels, euphoric at the risk. Bianca urged him to chase bigger deals, mocking the dullness of suburban life. Each new step tugged him further from Sarah's gentle devotion. Meanwhile, Sarah chalked up Keith's distraction to the stress of expansions, her patience enduring heartbreak she couldn't define. She never suspected the scale of betrayal brewing, or the merciless blow that would soon shatter her world, an eviction orchestrated by her own husband, just as she carried his unborn child. It happened on a stormy Saturday evening. Sarah was well into her second trimester. She'd spent the day organizing a surprise baby shower invitation list, hoping a small, heartwarming gathering would reawaken Keith's tenderness. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Keith marched in, soaked from a business meeting with out-of-town investors. His expression was grim, overshadowed by an unspoken fury. She approached him with concern, but he brushed her off. After a tense silence, he finally spat out the words that would unravel everything. "We're done, Sarah," he said, voice shaking with a mix of anger and twisted resolve. "I can't keep pretending this marriage works. I've met someone else, and I want you out." Sarah froze, the color draining from her face. She'd harbored quiet suspicions about his fidelity, but hearing it confirmed left her numb. "Keith," she pleaded, tears brimming, "we're having a child. How can you do this?" He refused to meet her gaze. "This child was never my plan. I can't handle it. I have bigger aspirations. Bianca understands me. She's not tying me down with domestic illusions. I'm sorry, but I can't live this lie anymore." Her heart pounded with a dizzying mix of shock and devastation. She stammered, "Where am I supposed to go? I have no job right now, no savings beyond what we share." Keith's jaw tightened. "Take whatever you need from the joint account for a few days, but that's it. I'll have the locks changed. I want you gone by Monday." The words fell like a guillotine. He turned on his heel, retreating upstairs to pack a bag for Bianca's. Sarah collapsed onto the living room sofa, sobs racking her. The child inside her kicked, as if sensing her turmoil. Unable to process the cruelty, she tried calling her parents, but they lived states away, struggling financially themselves. Friends in Detroit were mostly superficial business acquaintances of Keith's, not a support network she could rely on. The next morning, she pleaded for time to find a place, but Keith remained cold. He claimed their sprawling suburban house didn't belong to her. Anyway, she was just a passenger in his success. By Monday, she hastily stuffed clothes into suitcases, tears blurring her sight. Exhausted and terrified, she loaded her possessions into her aging sedan. Her belly cramped from stress, but she forced herself to remain steady. In the driveway, she glanced back at the house that was once her safe haven, now barred to her. Keith stood at the door, not a hint of remorse on his face. She drove off into the rain, a silent vow forming in her heart. She might be homeless, pregnant, and betrayed, but she wasn't broken. One day, she'd rise above this injustice, though at that moment she had no inkling how spectacularly fate would fulfill that promise. Sarah's car rumbled into the city, the night sky weeping from clouds that matched her despair. With no relatives nearby and limited funds, she parked in a public lot downtown, rummaging for motels to call. A crumpled note in her glove compartment was all she had, phone numbers of old college friends. She dialed a few, but none picked up. She needed a place that wouldn't cost her the last of her meager emergency stash. Eventually, she found a rundown motel that accepted her battered credit card. The room reeked of stale smoke, the sheets threadbare. Collapsing onto the bed, Sarah felt the baby stir. She whispered apologies to the unborn child, promising to keep them safe. An ache of loneliness seized her. How had the man she loved turned so cruel? She recalled sweet moments from their courtship, tears staining the thin pillow. The next few days blurred into a frantic scramble. Sarah visited social service offices, discovering wait lists for housing assistance. She considered calling Keith's office, begging for a pittance of spousal help, but shame stopped her. Instead, she sought temporary work. While scanning online boards at a library, she found a part-time office job with a small marketing startup. The pay was meager, but she latched onto it. The next challenge, where to stay once her motel funds ran out. A stroke of luck emerged when an elderly woman named Harriet, who manned the motel's front desk at nights, overheard Sarah discussing her situation. Harriet offered a sublet arrangement in her nephew's vacant apartment for a fraction of the usual rent provided. Sarah was discreet. Grateful, Sarah accepted, moving into a cramped space above a hardware store. It wasn't luxurious, but it sheltered her from the streets. Meanwhile, Keith flaunted his new relationship with Bianca. The local business community murmured about the scandal. Some disapproved, yet Keith's financial success overshadowed moral judgments. Bianca reveled in the attention, parading around in designer clothes, boasting that Keith was finalizing expansions in multiple cities. A few gossips pitied Sarah, but none openly challenged Keith's decisions. He was too powerful, too brash. Alone in her small loft, Sarah nursed a quiet determination. She refused to let this heartbreak define her destiny. She worked diligently, saving pennies. Each ultrasound appointment reminded her of the life growing inside. She'd whisper to her baby at night, "We'll make it, I promise." Though she had no illusions of an easy path, the first sparks of a fierce resilience ignited in her heart, a resilience that, unbeknownst to both her and Keith, would guide her to an extraordinary future, culminating in a day she'd stand triumphant at the helm of the very empire he won. Late autumn brought a chill to Detroit's streets. In a modest hospital room, Sarah clutched the rails of a labor bed, pain tearing through her contractions. No partner stood by her side, only a kind nurse offering gentle encouragement. Hours of anguish gave way to a moment of indescribable joy when Sarah delivered a baby boy she named Oliver. Tears of relief and love streamed down her face as she cradled him. The nurse noticed the sorrow behind her smile, sensing a deeper story. Released from the hospital with minimal fanfare, Sarah returned to the small loft. She balanced newborn care with her part-time marketing job, collapsing into exhaustion nightly. Harriet occasionally dropped by with homemade soup, while the hardware store owner gifted Sarah baby supplies from a local charity drive. Each act of kindness felt like a small miracle in a world that mostly turned a blind eye. Keith neither visited nor called. Sarah tried not to let bitterness consume her. She'd read about single mothers forging success, their grit forging new paths. She believed Oliver deserved a hopeful future. Determined to move forward, Sarah expanded her skill set, reading business publications, brushing up on modern marketing trends. She recognized that with hustle and resourcefulness, she could perhaps create a stable life for her son. She refused to be simply a victim of Keith's cruelty. Opportunity knocked when her marketing boss recognized Sarah's raw talent for understanding consumer needs. Despite her personal struggles, she delivered creative campaigns that boosted small brand awareness. He offered her a full-time position with modest benefits. Overjoyed, Sarah juggled childcare with her new responsibilities. She found a trustworthy neighbor to watch Oliver during the day, trading small chores in exchange for babysitting. Meanwhile, Keith's star soared higher. He and Bianca attended galas, posted photos from lavish getaways. A feature in a Detroit business magazine lauded him for an upcoming development project. The article omitted any mention of the wife he cast aside. Still, Keith couldn't fully dodge rumors that he'd abandoned a pregnant spouse. Some associates raised eyebrows, but as long as profits flowed, condemnation remained muted. In her loft, Sarah sighed at each new mention of Keith's success, but it no longer shattered her. She'd found an anchor in motherhood. Each night, she gazed at Oliver's sleeping form, vowing to create a future free from heartbreak and relying solely on her own strength. A quiet ambition stirred, forging goals she never considered while married. She'd build something bigger and better, fueled by the ultimate revenge, living well, achieving beyond Keith's shadow. The seeds of a remarkable transformation, one that would eventually return her to Keith's realm at the pinnacle of power, began to germinate in her determined heart. As months rolled by, Sarah's adept marketing skills earned praise from her boss and clients. Her part-time role turned into a full-time contract, then a senior position. She found satisfaction in turning struggling local companies' images around, implementing digital campaigns that increased their visibility. She eventually caught the eye of a small group of angel investors looking to support budding entrepreneurs in the Detroit area. One day, a man named Adrian Yang, an investor known for championing underdog ventures, approached Sarah at a local business networking event. He'd heard about her knack for marketing transformations. Over coffee, he asked if she'd ever considered starting her own agency. Initially startled, Sarah admitted it had crossed her mind, but she lacked the funds. Adrian suggested a meeting, explaining that his group had seed money for promising startups, especially those led by women. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Oliver was now a rambunctious toddler, her finances still precarious. If she risked everything to found an agency, what if it failed? Adrian's calm confidence reassured her. "I've seen your work. You can do this. You already juggle responsibilities that would break lesser people." Over the next few weeks, Sarah poured herself into drafting a business plan. Late nights after Oliver's bedtime found her hunched over the kitchen table, charting out service offerings, growth projections, cost breakdowns. She hammered out a brand name, Catalyst Marketing Solutions, hoping it would catalyze local businesses into success. Adrian and his group, impressed by her thoroughness, offered a modest but adequate investment in exchange for a small equity stake. Sarah gulped, realizing this leap of faith could transform her life. She took it, handing in her notice at her marketing firm. Her boss, though sad to see her go, wished her well. Soon, Catalyst Marketing Solutions launched in a rented co-working space, with Sarah as the sole employee. She hustled for clients, leveraging connections from her prior job. Within months, she secured her first big contract from a mid-sized manufacturer rebranding for modern times. The results soared beyond expectations, netting her a glowing testimonial. Amid these personal triumphs, she rarely thought of Keith until she'd overhear news of him unveiling a new building or see him photographed with Bianca at a downtown event. Each mention poked an old wound, but the pain lessened as her new identity strengthened. Oliver, now a curly-haired bundle of laughter, motivated her each morning. Gradually, Catalyst's reputation grew. More clients rolled in. Sarah hired a small team, mostly mums returning to the workforce, creating a supportive environment she once lacked. No one, not even Sarah, suspected how a fateful twist of business synergy would soon entwine her rising agency with the enterprise Keith boasted. And in the not-too-distant future, the man who left her destitute would find himself at the mercy of her unstoppable ascendance. 2 years into Catalyst's journey, Sarah found her schedule packed with client meetings, strategy sessions, and the daily bustle of running a small but rapidly growing agency. She now employed half a dozen staff, graphic designers, social media specialists, account managers, each bringing fresh creativity under her leadership. Their success stories multiplied. A local brewery quadrupled foot traffic after an innovative campaign. A struggling fitness chain saw membership spikes with Sarah's branding pivot. Then came an unexpected inquiry. A major real estate firm was seeking marketing proposals to rejuvenate one of their stagnant property developments. The RFP, request for proposal, arrived with minimal details about the real estate conglomerate's identity. Intrigued by the potential big-budget project, Sarah assigned 2 staff members to investigate. They discovered the property management branch was a subsidiary of none other than Anderson Ventures' Keith's empire. The realization made Sarah's pulse spike. She paused, unsure whether to proceed. Yet, the project could catapult Catalyst into the next tier, opening national exposure. After conferring with her lead account manager, she decided to pitch anyway. Business was business, and she reasoned Keith likely had no direct involvement in day-to-day property marketing. If they won, it might be managed by separate executives. The staff prepared a polished presentation focusing on the development's potential for eco-friendly features and local community engagement, a hallmark of Catalyst's approach. On the day of the pitch, Sarah, dressed in a sharp navy suit, heart hammering. She and her team entered a sleek boardroom where 2 managers from Anderson Ventures greeted them. No sign of Keith. Sarah exhaled relief. She delivered her polished proposal, weaving in data-driven insights and creative campaign mock-ups. The managers appeared impressed, nodding thoughtfully. Another agency pitched after them. A week later, Catalyst got the call. They won the contract. Elation warred with caution. Sarah recognized the looming risk. Eventually, Keith might discover the link. But the managers who hired Catalyst were enthusiastic. They barely mentioned the CEO, referencing only mid-level approvals. Over the next months, Catalyst poured energy into reviving the property's image, unveiling a fresh brand identity and interactive events. Public interest soared. Sarah's staff gleaned that Keith rarely meddled in this arm of the company, focusing instead on bigger expansions. Still, each time Sarah signed an invoice or stepped into an Anderson Ventures building, she felt a tremor of memory, recalling how Keith once tossed her out pregnant and penniless. Now, ironically, she was boosting his profits. She considered telling the managers about her history, but withheld it. Let the results speak for themselves. Little did she know, fate was spinning another twist. For in a matter of months, crises within Anderson Ventures would erupt, drawing Keith's frantic attention to the very property that Catalyst was salvaging. And that confrontation would spark the next chapter in a destiny none of them foresaw, Sarah's unstoppable path to owning the company that once caused her greatest misery. While Catalyst's marketing magic breathed new life into the property, a storm brewed inside Anderson Ventures. Keith's aggressive expansions, fueled by the high of Bianca's encouragement and his own thirst for market dominance, were over-leveraged. A shaky commercial loan, linked to a downtown development that stalled, threatened the firm's liquidity. Investors started murmuring about leadership oversights. At first, Keith dismissed the warnings. He hosted flashy investor dinners, proclaiming new acquisitions in the pipeline. But behind closed doors, the finance team warned him that monthly cash flow barely covered interest payments, leaving little cushion for unexpected costs. A string of negative press emerged after a construction site incident revealed shady contractor practices. The fiasco tarnished the brand, spooking potential partners. Even Bianca, once enthralled by Keith's confidence, began to complain that his empire felt increasingly chaotic. She spent more time in Chicago, rumored to be quietly building alliances of her own. In an attempt to quell the panic, Keith turned his gaze to smaller branches of the company, demanding cost cuts and boosted revenue. That included the real estate unit currently employing Catalyst's services. Their success at revitalizing the property was a bright spot in an otherwise grim forecast. Keith demanded to see numbers, wanting to tout a success story to shareholders. The manager overseeing the project reported major improvements in occupancy rates, media coverage, and public buzz thanks to Catalyst Marketing Solutions. Curious about the marketing firm behind such results, Keith asked for details. When he heard the founder's name, it punched through him like a jolt of electricity. Sarah Anderson. Previously, Sarah Marshall. The manager stuttered uncertainly. Well, yes, she's the CEO. She's done wonders for the brand's reputation. Outwardly, Keith kept a calm facade, but inside, horror mingled with confusion. Sarah? My Sarah? That evening, Keith locked himself in his office. He recalled the day he cast her out, pregnant and tearful, with only a fraction of their joint funds. He'd never inquired about her fate, comforted by the idea that she'd vanish quietly. Now she was re-emerging in his company's orbit as a marketing savior. The sting of irony and guilt unsettled him. He told himself it couldn't be the same Sarah, but a quick search revealed photos from Catalyst's website. Indeed, it was her, and she looked poised, professional, exuding confidence that took his breath away. Mortified, Keith decided not to intervene yet. He'd watch from the shadows, letting her fix the property issue, but the situation was more dire than a single project's success. If the bigger expansions collapsed, Anderson Ventures might default. Desperate for a scapegoat or a saving grace, Keith weighed every option. He never guessed that Sarah was no longer the timid wife he once crushed, but a force forging alliances that might soon extend beyond marketing and into controlling stakes of the very empire he clung to. Oblivious to Keith's discovery, Sarah pressed forward with Catalyst's property campaign. The project soared, awarding her team internal accolades at Anderson Ventures. That success led other branches within the conglomerate to inquire about Catalyst's expertise. Soon, Sarah found herself juggling multiple proposals from different divisions of Anderson. She carefully assigned staff, ensuring each new contract had her personal oversight. After all, it was risky territory. One day, a conference was scheduled between Catalyst and Anderson's upper management to discuss expansions of the marketing strategy. Sarah arrived at the plush corporate tower wearing a crisp blazer, head high. She expected the usual mid-level managers. Yet, as she stepped into the glass-walled boardroom, her heart lurched. At the far end of the table, Keith Anderson stood, flipping through a file. He looked up and locked eyes with her. The room's chatter stilled instantly. Keith's expression shifted from shock to a strained composure, as if grappling with a tidal wave of memory. Sarah's heart hammered, but she inhaled, remembering how far she'd come. She approached with dignity, greeting the managers politely, ignoring Keith. The meeting commenced, discussing progress and upcoming marketing expansions. Keith listened silently, occasionally nodding at the manager's praises of Catalyst's work. Sarah presented slides calmly, forcing herself to speak confidently despite the swirl of emotion. Eventually, the meeting ended, managers filing out. Keith motioned for Sarah to remain, voice tight. "Could we talk alone?" Sarah hesitated, but nodded. Once the door closed, an uneasy hush draped the room. Keith exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "Sarah, I never expected to see you like this," he began haltingly. She fixed him with a cool stare. "I bet you didn't. I'm just doing my job, Mr. Anderson." The formal tone stung him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I know I hurt you. I was someone else back then. The company's in trouble now, and I'm grateful for your help. But can we? "We can keep this professional," Sarah cut in. "That's all." The air crackled with unspoken pain. Keith swallowed, glimpsing a fierce confidence in her eyes he'd never seen before. Part of him wanted to apologize profusely, but the words died on his tongue. He managed, "Thank you for the work you've done. It means a lot to the employees. Let's leave personal matters out of it if that's your wish." Sarah nodded, gathering her laptop. As she turned to leave, Keith blurted, I never asked. The child," her jaw clenched. She shot back, "My son is healthy. That's all you need to know." Then she walked out, leaving him in a swirl of regret and confusion. The door shut, and Keith collapsed into a chair, the memory of her pregnant and homeless slicing through his composure. She was no longer the meek wife from the past. She was a woman with power, a woman who might soon hold the key to saving or ending his faltering empire. The tension between them was far from resolved, and the next confrontation loomed large on the horizon. After that tense meeting, Sarah tried to compartmentalize the upheaval of seeing Keith again. She poured energy into Catalyst's newly expanded duties for Anderson Ventures. The success of each campaign boosted the property arm's revenue, offering a glimmer of hope for the conglomerate. Yet, behind closed doors, the finance department sounded alarm bells. Major debt deadlines approached, and the capital from ongoing projects wouldn't suffice. The threat of a default soared. Keith, aware his fortress was on the brink, tried to secure emergency loans. But the tarnish on his reputation combined with industry whispers about unscrupulous deals scared off potential backers. He found himself sinking daily into despair. Bianca, seeing the writing on the wall, quietly distanced herself, rumored to be dating a wealthier figure in Europe. Investors demanded radical changes. Possibly a new CEO. Keith's position teetered precariously. Observing the swirling crisis, Sarah gleaned from mid-level managers that Anderson Ventures was in dire straits. For all the success Catalyst brought to smaller real estate segments, the core expansions bled cash. She felt a complex swirl of emotions, pity for employees, many of whom treated her kindly, and a pang of personal history with the brand that once cast her aside. One afternoon, a quiet conversation with Catalyst's investor, Adrian Yang, sparked a bold idea. What if Sarah could leverage Catalyst's position to broker a controlling stake in Anderson Ventures? The concept felt audacious, but Adrian pointed out that if the company was nearing bankruptcy, its shares might be acquired cheaply. They need new leadership, someone who can rebuild trust. Adrian said, "You know the internal workings. You have relationships there." At first, Sarah balked at the notion of owning Keith's company. It felt too surreal, but she recognized the strategic potential. If she orchestrated a deal with Catalyst's backers, they might buy enough shares or the distressed debt to force a restructuring. She'd protect the employees from collapse, salvage the real estate successes, and ironically, dethrone Keith, the man who humiliated her. The more she thought about it, the more rational it seemed. Sarah convened with Adrian and a circle of supportive financiers. They mapped out potential strategies, purchasing the defaulted loans at a discount, converting them to equity, or forming alliances with existing shareholders who'd lost faith in Keith. The plan required stealth and impeccable timing, as Keith might sabotage any attempt to usurp him. Though Sarah trembled at the moral enormity of toppling her ex-husband's empire, she resolved. It wasn't mere vengeance. The employees deserved stable leadership, and Catalyst's mission aligned with uplifting local communities. If done properly, it could be a new dawn for the entire enterprise and a justice for the pregnant wife once left destitute. Eager and anxious, Sarah forged ahead, stepping onto a path that would soon transform her life and deliver Keith his ultimate reckoning. A mounting sense of dread enveloped Keith as the weeks slipped by. By all measures, Anderson Ventures hovered at the edge of insolvency. Banks threatened foreclosure on several developments. The CFO warned that payroll might be delayed if no capital injection arrived soon. Keith's once loyal lieutenants eyed him with suspicion, whispering that he'd lost control. Caught in a flurry of crisis meetings, Keith tried to exude confidence. He boasted about final negotiations for a huge private equity deal that might bail them out. In truth, every potential partner demanded majority control, effectively relegating Keith to a figurehead. His pride balked at such terms. Meanwhile, Bianca's departure left him hollow, a humiliating reminder that she'd chased luxury, not loyalty. In a desperate bid, Keith approached old investors he once alienated. They either shut their doors or offered punishing terms. With each rejection, his nights turned sleepless. Visions of losing the empire he built haunted him. Memories of Sarah fluttered unbidden. He recalled how she'd stood by him in the early days, believed in him when no one else did. Guilt gnawed, but he clung to pride, too stubborn to seek her help. Then, a glimmer of hope arrived. A contact suggested a consortium was quietly buying Anderson Ventures' debt at steep discounts. If they stepped forward to restructure, it might save the company from immediate collapse. Keith latched on to that rumor, instructing his CFO to identify these mystery purchasers. But information was murky, only that the group's lead figure was a local entrepreneur with strong ties in marketing and real estate. Puzzled, Keith struggled to identify them. With time running out, he convened a frantic board meeting. The CFO confirmed that someone had acquired a significant chunk of distressed Anderson Ventures bonds. They possessed the legal right to demand repayment or restructure the debt. The CFO delivered the bombshell. The new debt holder requested a direct discussion with the board next week. They might propose a takeover. The CFO murmured ominously. Keith's heart pounded. He demanded details, but the CFO had none. Behind the scenes, Sarah quietly finalized her plan. Through Adrian's network, the consortium had mopped up Anderson Ventures bonds for pennies on the dollar. Next, they'd present a reorganization plan, inject capital, secure ownership stakes, overhaul leadership. As Catalyst's founder, Sarah would step into the role of interim CEO if the board approved. The arrangement's final sign-off hinged on a single meeting. On that day, Keith would face the unstoppable truth. The woman he cast into the streets was about to stand before him, not as a pleading spouse, but as the potential owner of the very company he once wielded as a weapon. Fate had come full circle, and Keith had nowhere left to run. The boardroom crackled with tension. Suits from various departments filed in, faces grim. Keith, flanked by a handful of loyal executives, tapped a pen anxiously. The CFO whispered updates. "This consortium we're meeting is unstoppable. If we reject their plan, they can force us into bankruptcy." Keith's gut twisted at the thought. He braced himself as the door opened. Sarah entered, poised in a crisp black suit, accompanied by Adrian Yang and two other financiers. Gasps echoed across the room. The entire leadership recognized Catalyst's CEO, but seeing her stride in with such authority stunned them. Keith stood, fists clenched, heat flooding his cheeks. Could it be? She was the face of this takeover? Sarah's voice, calm and professional, filled the silence. "Good morning, everyone. We represent the majority holder of Anderson Ventures' distressed bonds. We're here to propose a restructuring plan that can save the company." She kept her gaze fixed on the board, avoiding direct eye contact with Keith, an icy formality that rattled him. Adrian distributed documents outlining their proposition: immediate infusion of capital to cover payroll and urgent debts, with the condition that the consortium receive controlling equity. Additionally, Catalyst would be integrated as the official marketing arm for all future developments. Key seats on the board would shift to the consortium's nominees. with Sarah as interim CEO until stability was restored. The board pored over the papers. Murmurs rose. For some, relief at any solution overshadowed the shock that it was Sarah at the helm. Others glared at Keith, silently blaming him for leading them into ruin. Keith, heart racing, finally spoke up. "This is unacceptable. You can't waltz in and dethrone me. I founded this company." Sarah's lips tightened. "You also left the company precariously over-leveraged," she replied softly. "This plan ensures employees keep their jobs and the brand we built once upon a time doesn't collapse." She paused, letting the significance of her words settle. "It's the only viable alternative to bankruptcy, Mr. Anderson." A torrent of conflicting emotions torched Keith's composure. Fury, shame, a flicker of grudging respect that she orchestrated such a bold move. The board, battered by months of crises, whispered about the terms. The CFO admitted privately that this was the best rescue they'd seen. Slowly, heads began nodding. The final vote was called. One by one, directors raised their hands in favor of the takeover. Only Keith abstained, glowering in defeat. With a trembling voice, the board chair announced acceptance of the plan. Sarah nodded, expression carefully schooled. "Thank you. We'll finalize details with legal counsel immediately." Then she turned to Keith. "I'm willing to let you remain as an advisor, focusing on your initial specialty, real estate scouting. But the final call rests with me now." Keith stared at her, speechless. The woman he once humiliated was now stepping into his corner office, on the cusp of owning what he believed no one could wrest away. Fate had indeed played its hand, and the next steps, how each of them handled this power shift, would define their story's final resolution. After the takeover meeting, everything moved swiftly. Lawyers hammered out contracts, transferring control of Anderson Ventures to the consortium fronted by Sarah and Adrian. The press latched onto the dramatic story. A local marketing genius, once rumored to be ex-wife to the embattled Keith Anderson, was saving his company from financial ruin. Journalists sniffed around for details of their personal history, but Sarah strictly enforced her privacy. Keith, stripped of his CEO authority, retreated to his corner office, which felt stiflingly small now. He had the title of real estate strategist, a role Sarah offered with mild pity, but also to ease the board's acceptance, ensuring continuity with certain long-time clients. Each day, he trudged in, head low, watching staff pay reverence to Sarah as they once did to him. Some employees quietly celebrated the leadership change, praising Sarah's calm approach to reorganization. Outside, Bianca's name no longer accompanied his. She was rumored to have relocated to Paris with a new partner. Keith felt a hollow bitterness, realizing how ephemeral her loyalty was. He tried to keep his distance from Sarah, but they inevitably crossed paths for project updates. In these brief interactions, he glimpsed a side of her he'd never fully appreciated: poised confidence tempered by empathy. She advocated for employee welfare, restructured operations fairly, and tackled daily crises with unwavering grace. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Keith found Sarah alone in the newly minted CEO's office. Stacks of paperwork covered her desk, a half-eaten sandwich beside her laptop. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "I wanted to check how the Redwood Park project is going," he mumbled. Sarah motioned for him to sit. She updated him on marketing progress, the synergy with newly allocated funds. Then an unsteady silence settled. He gathered courage. "I regret everything I did to you, Sarah," he whispered. "I was blinded by ego, chasing illusions. I did you manage okay?" She gazed at him, memories flickering of the nights. She spent homeless, pregnant, the heartbreak of deliverance alone. "I survived. Because I had to," she replied evenly. "Oliver's well, in case you wonder. He's 3, bright and curious. Keith's eyes misted. "I'd like to see him someday if you'd allow." She considered it, tears pressing at her own eyes. "He deserves to know his father, but only if you come with honesty. I won't let him be hurt." Keith nodded, voice catching. "I promise, if you'd give me that chance." They parted with a faint glimmer of reconciliation. Sarah carried the weight of the empire now, forging new partnerships, ensuring thousands of employees retained security. Keith lingered in the background, struggling with guilt and humility. For Sarah, the immediate future demanded resilience and vision. She was no longer that helpless wife, she was a mother, a CEO, a triumphant figure who rose from ashes to claim what was once denied her. Only one final step remained: the official unveiling of Sarah Anderson as the new face of the company, a public statement that the tide had turned irreversibly. 2 months later, the newly rebranded Anderson Catalyst Holdings held a press conference. Local reporters, curious investors, and employees crowded the event space. At the podium stood Sarah, clad in a refined suit, a gentle smile lighting her face. Behind her, a banner displayed the merged logos, symbolizing a renaissance for a once embattled empire. She spoke succinctly. "Today marks a fresh start. Our mission is to foster ethical growth, community engagement, and employee well-being. We'll honor the roots of Anderson Ventures while forging a path that benefits all stakeholders. This is personal for me. I believe Detroit thrives when we invest in people as much as profit." A wave of applause followed. Among the crowd, Keith stood quietly. He watched the woman he once dismissed glow with confidence. He recalled the cruel words he used to sever their marriage, the memory of forcing her out pregnant. Now, the city recognized her as a beacon of revitalization. To his surprise, he felt not resentment, but a wistful pride. She had become everything he once boasted. He'd be a true leader. Later, in a private corridor, Sarah found Keith waiting. Softly, he said, "Congratulations, Miss CEO. You've done what I never could, brought integrity alongside ambition." She smiled, tension easing. "I had to learn the hard way, Keith. But maybe it was meant to be. This city and the people here deserve a company that values them." He nodded, swallowing emotion. After a pause, he mustered, "And Oliver?" Sarah's expression softened. "He's curious about you. If you want to build a relationship, we can talk about a careful step. But no illusions, he's not an accessory. He's a child who needs consistency." Keith exhaled relief. "I understand. Thank you for even considering it. I'll do better." As the event ended, reporters clamored for interviews with Sarah. She faced cameras confidently, praising her team and the employees. When asked about Keith's role, she clarified he was consulting on real estate, a valued perspective for their expansions. The subtle acknowledgement signaled she bore no grudges in business, even if personal wounds lingered. In the hush that followed, Sarah retreated to her top-floor office, once Keith's domain, and gazed at the city lights. Her journey had stretched from pregnant and homeless, abandoned by the man she trusted most, to the unstoppable force steering the same empire that cast her aside. She thought of Oliver at home, entrusted to a kind sitter, and felt a rush of gratitude. Life, with all its heartbreak, had led her here. She had triumphed not through vengeance alone, but through perseverance, skill, and the unwavering love for her child. The next day, employees arriving at the newly rebranded building saw a plaque by the entrance, summarizing the company's new ethos. They whispered the name Sarah Anderson with respect, aware of her improbable rise. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner, Keith began forging a delicate bond with his son, one overshadowed by regret, yet offering a glimmer of redemption. For Sarah, the future stretched limitless, each day proof that from ruin can spring a grand rebirth, and that sometimes the best revenge is forging a success so radiant it eclipses every shadow from the past. Life often surprises us with its stark reversals, carving triumph out of heartbreak and redemption from betrayal. For Sarah, a woman abandoned and left homeless while bearing a child, the road to reclaiming her dignity was anything but easy. Yet through resourcefulness, unwavering resolve, and a fierce devotion to her son, she transformed her misfortune into unassailable power, ultimately becoming the proud owner of the very company that once cast her aside. Meanwhile, the millionaire who thought he owned the world discovered that arrogance and disloyalty lead to empty halls and echoes of regret.
The winter wind bit through her threadbare coat, but Sarah Donovan barely noticed. Strolling past neon-lit windows, she couldn't ignore the relentless ache in her belly, an ache caused by hunger and the 6-month child she carried. Shivering on the sidewalk, she glanced up at a massive TV screen, blaring the nightly financial news. There, beaming under the bright studio lights, was a man she once promised to love forever. William Donovan, her husband, a multimillionaire, famous, admired, while she trembled in the cold. Her heart twisted. How had their world turned so cruel? She had nothing, and he seemed to have it all. Sarah Donovan had known hunger before, but never like this. On that frigid evening, the wind seemed to slice through layers of her clothing directly into her bones. She pulled the sides of her coat together in a desperate attempt to keep warm. Through the swirling snowflakes, she could just make out the bright flashing monitors in Times Square. On the largest screen, a familiar face, William Donovan, appeared. His name scrolled in large letters. Tech Investor of the Year. Applause thundered behind him in the recorded clip. Brightly lit, he was addressing a hall filled with wealth power and cameras from CNN, CNBC, and local networks. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away. That face, the strong jaw, the slight smile that once reassured her everything would be all right. Now he looked polished, exuding confidence. She hadn't seen him in person for almost a year. Her chest clenched with memories of the day he walked out, arguments about money and ambition overshadowing their love. She'd tried to reason with him to support him, but each conversation ended in a new fight, culminating in the shocking decision he would succeed alone. The flickering billboard cut to a montage of images, William shaking hands with Mark Cuban at a tech conference, then introducing a pioneering piece of software in Silicon Valley. Sarah saw glimpses of glamorous parties William in a tailored tuxedo, accompanied by men and women she had never met. The talk show host concluded the segment by proclaiming, "William Donovan, America's newest business sensation." Then the screen blinked to a car commercial. Just like that, he vanished into the night. Sarah blinked back tears. There was a time William's arms had been her warm refuge, promising they'd face every storm side by side. And now, pregnant with his child, she walked alone on icy sidewalks, scrounging for a place to sleep. She was determined not to cry, but her emotions overwhelmed her as she gazed up at the ironically beautiful Christmas lights decorating the city. By all appearances, the world around her was celebrating, and she was surviving. Barely. She pressed a hand against her abdomen, feeling the slightest kick. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to the life inside her. It was a promise she intended to keep, though at that moment she wasn't sure how. When she turned away from the screen and stumbled onward, her foot snagged on a piece of broken pavement. A stinging pain shot through her ankle, and she nearly collapsed. She bit down a cry, scanning the crowd for help, but passers-by, preoccupied with their own rush of errands and holiday shopping, scarcely gave her a glance. That's what life had become after she left the small studio in which she and William once lived alone, invisible. Sarah's pride was bruised, but she refused to crumble. She passed by a bakery. Through the window, the smell of fresh bread made her stomach twist. She had to preserve her last dollar for the cheapest motel, a place with peeling wallpaper and barely functioning plumbing, but at least it was indoors. She stepped inside, bought a small roll and devoured it in 3 bites. Outside again, the wind roared, intensifying the city's clamor. Still clutching her abdomen, she decided that tomorrow everything had to change. She would find a job. She'd scour the city for help. She would not let her child enter this world with nothing but sorrow. But for tonight, she needed a place to rest, a place that wasn't some abandoned corner or shadowed alley. Even if it cost her last few dollars, she had to prioritize the safety of the life inside her. As Sarah walked away from the mesmerizing screens of Times Square, one thought pulsed in her mind. Her husband, the man she had once loved beyond reason, was thriving. And here she was, pregnant and alone. Could the chasm between them grow any wider? Long before he was the darling of business magazines and tech summits, William Donovan was a daydreamer writing code in the corner of the local university library. Sarah remembered the first time she saw him. It was her sophomore year, and she was majoring in English literature at Columbia. The library's back table had been her favorite spot, quiet, perfect for reading. She noticed him, a junior in computer science, leaning over a laptop with an exasperated scowl. Curious and drawn by the intellectual frenzy in his eyes, she'd asked, "Need any help?" Although Sarah barely understood advanced programming, the question sparked the first real conversation they ever had. William's exhausted face broke into the shyest of smiles, and she recalled thinking, "He's kind of cute under all that stress." They chatted about his class project, an algorithm for data compression. Sarah confessed she was more comfortable discussing Shakespeare than software, and he teased her gently. From that moment on, they were a constant presence in each other's lives. Their connection seemed effortless. He awakened her interest in technology's potential. She introduced him to literary classics, weaving in metaphors about love and ambition. They started dating by Christmas break of that year, with sweet, simple moments, late-night walks around campus, scrounging for cheap coffee in the student lounge, trying out new ramen spots around Manhattan. They were 2 dreamers, William longing to found a tech startup that would revolutionize how people shared data, and Sarah hoping to become a novelist. The future seemed limitless. She could still feel the way he used to grasp her hand whenever she doubted herself, as if to say, "We'll get through anything." Yet as graduation approached, financial stresses haunted them. William, determined to compete in the tech world, pitched his software to small investors, but faced constant rejection. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to get traction for her short stories, or even land a decent internship. Their families offered little financial support. William's parents, proud owners of a modest real estate business in upstate New York, expected him to follow a more traditional path and often expressed skepticism toward his entrepreneurial obsession. Sarah's mother, whose chronic illness drained the family's savings, couldn't help beyond a few encouraging phone calls. When they got married in a humble civil ceremony right after graduation, they were brimming with hope. Their honeymoon was a short weekend, spent in a budget motel near Niagara Falls, the only getaway they could afford. But they didn't care. What mattered was their shared devotion. They returned to New York City, renting a cheap studio apartment in Queens. William coded into the late hours, while Sarah worked as a barista by day and scribbled short stories by night. Their love burned like a bright flame until cracks began to form. William became consumed with success, obsessed, really. Each failed pitch to an investor sent him into a silent downward spiral that led to outbursts. Sarah tried to reassure him that failure was part of the journey, but her optimism only irritated him. As months dragged on, the bills piled up. William grew desperate, dabbling in risky deals with shady angel investors. They had endless arguments about money. When success finally arrived nearly 2 years into their marriage, with a major investor, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, buying into William's new software idea, Sarah hoped that would ease the tension. But ironically, it only magnified their differences. William was suddenly thrust into corporate meetings, traveling across the country, networking with high-profile entrepreneurs. Invitations to flashy events replaced their quiet dinners. He no longer came home with cheap takeout. He was gone most nights, presumably in boardrooms or at fancy parties. Sarah felt him slipping away. A year passed in that swirl of success, and Sarah was left behind, often alone, in their now upscale condo near Central Park. William's time was devoured by business calls and conferences on the West Coast. When he was home, he was distracted, fidgety, unwilling to share stories of his day. She remembered their final argument vividly. She'd asked him to spend one evening with her to reconnect. He retorted that she had no clue how hard he worked to keep them afloat, how she should be more grateful. That night ended with William storming out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. He never came back. Days became weeks. Sarah's calls and texts went unanswered. Soon bank notices arrived explaining how William had switched all joint accounts to his name alone. Sarah had no income. Worse yet, 2 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. Fear overrode any bitterness, but desperation set in. Rent soared, her barista job didn't pay enough, and she could no longer afford the condo. Before long, she was forced onto the street. She tried contacting William's PR office, but the line always went to a polite assistant who left her on hold until she hung up in frustration. Now, witnessing his face on the giant screen in Times Square, that entire whirlwind of a past threatened to engulf her. She reminded herself of one vow she'd made, standing in that battered apartment with an eviction notice in hand. I will survive and protect this child. If the father refused to care, she would find a way. She would not become just another nameless tragedy in the city's underbelly. Morning brought little relief from the cold. Sarah woke on a narrow, squeaky bed in the cheapest motel she could find. The heater rattled uselessly, barely keeping the air above freezing. She had about $15 left, enough for a couple of cheap sandwiches, maybe bus fare if she wanted to head to the next shelter. But Sarah was stubborn. She believed there had to be something better. She packed her meager belongings, a change of clothes, her worn copy of Emily Dickinson's poems, a phone with a cracked screen that almost never picked up a signal. Everything fit into a single bag. Every step outside felt like walking through a wind tunnel. She knew she had to find help soon. A pregnant woman living on the streets was a tragedy waiting to happen. She headed to the nearest public library, an older building with classical columns, seeking warmth and free internet to look for job openings. Inside, near the community bulletin board, she found a flyer advertising a free women's shelter in Brooklyn. It promised hot meals counseling and prenatal support. She tore off the address tab. This might be my best chance, she thought, shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time in days. She hopped on a bus, ignoring the pitying looks from a couple of other passengers. Upon arrival, she found the shelter nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The building was large, with peeling paint and sagging steps, but the warmth she felt when she walked inside was immediate and comforting. A friendly volunteer named Rebecca greeted her with a kind smile. After scribbling her name on a form, Sarah was shown to a cramped but clean room shared with 3 other women. Each cot had fresh blankets and a small side table. Meals are served at 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening, Rebecca explained. We also have prenatal checkups every Friday with a visiting nurse from Bellevue Hospital. Sarah nearly cried with relief. A medical checkup was a blessing. She hadn't seen a doctor since learning of her pregnancy. Rebecca chatted with her for a while, asking about her situation. Though Sarah felt hesitant to reveal too much, there was something about Rebecca's gentle nature that encouraged honesty. She admitted her husband had left, that he was well off, and that she had nowhere else to go. Rebecca listened, never judging, then simply patted Sarah's shoulder. You'll be safe here. You'll get back on your feet. I'm here if you need anything, Rebecca offered. Those words of encouragement did more for Sarah's spirit than anything had in months. That first night in the shelter, Sarah lay in the dark, hearing the muffled snores of her roommates. She felt a faint flutter within her baby moving. I'm not alone, she reminded herself. This life inside her gave her purpose. She recalled an old Emily Dickinson line. She loved something about hope being a thing with feathers. That hope had perched in her soul, refusing to abandon her even in life's darkest corners. The next morning she joined the breakfast queue. The food wasn't luxurious oatmeal, a banana-powdered orange juice, but it was warm and nourishing. Some of the residents eyed her suspiciously. They were all at different points in life's struggles, yet in their gazes, Sarah sensed a silent camaraderie that had been missing in her life for so long. As she sat down to eat, Rebecca joined her. We have a job support program, Rebecca said, her voice quiet. You'd get help writing a resume, searching for openings, maybe training. I know it can be tough to find something with no stable address, but we can try. Sarah nodded eagerly. That would be great, she replied, swallowing a surge of gratitude. She was ready to do anything office cleaning retail, anything that would help her earn enough for a deposit on a small apartment. But as she scrolled through job listings later that day, a rerun of a business show played on the shelter's TV in the lounge. They were discussing William Donovan again. A celebrity investor, Mark Cuban, had praised William's entrepreneurial drive, suggesting he was the future of American tech. Hearing the news anchor casually mention her husband's name felt like a punch to the gut. He was more successful than she'd even imagined. She took a deep breath, forced herself to look away from the screen, and told herself, this is my life now, and I'm not giving up. She wasn't sure if she hated him, missed him, or simply wished none of this had happened. All she knew was that she had to survive, and she would on her own terms. At precisely 9 in the morning the following Friday, Sarah waited in a makeshift exam room set up in the shelter's converted rec hall. Worn curtains partitioned the space. The volunteer nurse, Ms. Francis, bustled in, setting down a bag of medical supplies. She was a short, no-nonsense woman with bright, reassuring eyes. How are you feeling, dear? Ms. Francis asked, washing her hands and snapping on latex gloves. Sarah hesitated. She had been ignoring the dull ache in her lower back, the bouts of nausea that still came and went, and the constant exhaustion. Better now that I have a safe place to sleep, she admitted. Ms. Francis nodded, taking Sarah's vitals, measuring her belly, and listening carefully with a Doppler for the baby's heartbeat. The rhythmic whoosh-whoosh filled the air, and Sarah's eyes grew misty. This was the first time she'd heard her child's heartbeat. So strong, she thought, pressing a hand to her mouth. No major concerns right now, Ms. Francis informed, giving a small smile. But you need to be mindful of your diet. Get as much protein and healthy foods as you can. And rest. Stress can harm the baby too. Sarah almost laughed bitterly. Stress was the only thing she had in abundance. But she forced a bright nod. Ms. Francis noted that Sarah would need a formal medical file at a hospital soon in case of early labor or complications. We'll coordinate that, Ms. Francis added. In the meantime, do you have any support person for prenatal care? A family member or, her voice trailed. My husband's not around, Sarah said, swallowing a lump in her throat. No other family in the city. The nurse's expression turned sympathetic. Well, you're not alone. We're here to help. After the checkup, Sarah felt slightly more confident. The baby was healthy. That knowledge was the anchor she clung to. She spent her afternoons in the job support program, brushing up her typing skills, practicing interview responses with a counselor named Janet. Her English degree helped. She applied for positions as a receptionist, an editorial assistant, or even a part-time tutor. Most responses came back negative. Employers didn't want someone with an unstable address, or they required advanced certifications. But Sarah persevered. Days turned into weeks. The bulge in her belly became more pronounced, and so did the heaviness in her heart. She tried to keep track of the outside world, scanning newspapers in the library for job ads, occasionally glimpsing headlines about William Donovan's skyrocketing success. One day the paper featured a photograph of him leaving a high-end restaurant with a tall, elegant woman wearing designer clothes. The photo caption labeled her as Madeline Ashford, potential new business partner. Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced at her own reflection in the library window. Rumpled coat eyes ringed with fatigue. If William had moved on personally, was she even a memory? That evening her back pains grew sharper, and she realized with dread that her pregnancy was entering a stage where she would soon need consistent medical care. She couldn't keep skipping checkups or rely solely on the shelter nurse. She also worried about finances, diapers, baby clothes, a crib. Where would she get them? She'd joined a waiting list for government assistance, but bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace. Sarah found herself weeping some nights, the future an ominous shadow. Yet each morning she recalled the baby's heartbeat, reminding herself there was no choice but forward. One particularly cold day, she forced herself to walk 3 miles in the slushy streets to follow up on a potential receptionist position. She arrived soaked and shivering. Her hopes rose when the manager, a kindly older woman, offered a temporary role answering phones at a small publishing company. The pay was minimal, but it was something. She'd start Monday. Sarah left the office hugging a folder of paperwork and feeling a glimmer of pride. I'm making progress. When she returned to the shelter, though, she found Rebecca pale-faced in the hallway. We need to talk, Rebecca said quietly, leading Sarah to a corner. Apparently an acquaintance of Sarah's had come by looking for her, a man with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit. He left a business card that read, Donovan Enterprises. Sarah's heart hammered. She stared at the card, the swirling black and gold letters. Did he say anything she managed to ask? Just that he needed to speak with you regarding a personal matter. Sarah's mind whirled. Could it be William's lawyer? One of his personal aides? Did William know she was pregnant? She never thought he would actually search for her. A swirl of anger, fear, and a strange residual hope filled her. She resolved to call the number. Maybe it was finally time for a confrontation, a reckoning. She just didn't know what to expect. Sarah picked up a battered pay-as-you-go phone, a small victory from the shelter's resource program, and stared at the business card. It bore a name, Charles Whitmore, Legal Counsel. She dialed with trembling fingers, listening to the ring on the other end. Anxiety swelled. Finally, a crisp male voice answered. Charles Whitmore speaking. This is Sarah Donovan. You left your card at the shelter. Her voice sounded small. He cleared his throat. Ah, Mrs. Donovan. I'm glad you reached out. Mr. Donovan, your husband would like to set up a meeting. It's in regard to finances and certain changes to his estate. A chill ran down her spine. Was this about a divorce? She almost panicked at the thought, but she maintained composure. Why now? She asked. The question came out bitterly. Ma'am, I only have instructions to coordinate your meeting. Could you come by the Donovan Enterprises office downtown on Fifth Avenue? Sarah hesitated. I can't. Not immediately. She had a job orientation. Soon she had no decent clothes and no money for a taxi. Shall we say, next Tuesday at noon, he pressed. We'd be happy to reimburse your transportation. Mr. Donovan understands how difficult the city can be. He specifically requested you meet in a neutral setting. Sarah's anger flared at the paternalistic tone. But caution prevailed. All right. Tuesday. She hung up, heart thudding. William wants to meet. Part of her raged that he would drag her into some legal affair after all this time. Another part, small yet insistent, felt relief that maybe he would acknowledge their baby. Maybe do the right thing. And at least provide child support. Tuesday came quickly, and Sarah found herself rummaging through the shelter's donated clothing closet, picking out a modest black dress and a coat that fit snugly over her belly. Rebecca offered to do her hair in a simple bun. As she left, 6 women in the shelter wished her luck, though they knew only that she was meeting her ex. The Donovan Enterprises office towered over Fifth Avenue with mirrored glass windows. Sarah approached it anxiously, ignoring the doorman's raised eyebrow when she walked in. The marble-floored lobby gleamed, and well-dressed professionals hurried past, exuding an air of wealth. A statue of William's trademark D logo was on display near the elevators, a testament to his success. Charles Whitmore, a tall, slim man with graying hair, emerged from behind the reception area and greeted her with a polite bow. Mrs. Donovan. Right this way, he said, leading her to a plush conference room overlooking the city skyline. Soft leather chairs, a polished mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park. Everything screamed opulence. She perched on a chair, feeling out of place. Moments later, the door opened. In walked William Donovan. He wore a tailored charcoal suit and stepped forward with a hesitant smile. Sarah's throat constricted at the sight of him. He looked the same, yet different, older, more confident. She stood instinctively, placing a protective hand on her abdomen. If he noticed her rounded belly, he didn't show any immediate reaction. Sarah, he said quietly, as though testing the word. He paused, his eyes flicking to her stomach, then back to her face. Thank you for coming. I didn't realize you were, are you? She inhaled sharply. Pregnant, she finished. Yes. For nearly 6 months. A fleeting expression of shock, maybe guilt, flashed in his eyes. I didn't know, he said. You didn't tell me. Anger boiled in her. I tried. You cut all contact. You walked out. And her voice trembled. She clenched her fists. You were too busy with your empire to pick up the phone. He exhaled, looking pained. I'm sorry. I truly am. He sank into the chair opposite her, rubbing his temples. I messed up. I realize that now. I've been going through a lot, but it's no excuse. She eyed him warily, uncertain if this was genuine remorse or a performance. So why am I here? Did you need me to sign divorce papers? Is that it? William shook his head vigorously. No. That's not it at all. He looked at Charles, who stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Donovan asked me to assist in drafting an arrangement to provide you with financial support, enough to cover all prenatal care, childbirth expenses, and living costs. In addition, there's a trust fund he'd like to establish for the child. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, relief that there was some practical solution, indignation that he thought money alone could fix everything, and a flicker of hope. What about us? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Our marriage? William gazed at her eyes, clouded. I want to help you. And our child. I know I can't change the past, but I can at least do right by you now. He hesitated, swallowing hard. As for us, Sarah, I can't pretend I haven't caused terrible damage. I don't expect you to forgive me instantly. But maybe with time, she wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like they were strangers. She realized she was trembling. He's acknowledging the child, she told herself. That was step one. Charles laid out documents referencing monthly allowances, coverage for medical bills, etc. The amounts were staggering. Sarah had never seen such figures. She could live comfortably, rent an apartment, and never worry about basic needs again. But guilt gnawed at her. Should she accept this? She eyed William, her voice wavering. Why now? She asked. Why not? Before William's face was taut. When I saw you disappeared from our condo and heard rumors you were struggling, I tried to locate you, but I was overwhelmed with expansions, new deals, then the pandemic of responsibilities. I kept putting it off. He inhaled, pained. That was wrong. I realized I couldn't move forward, knowing you might be suffering. You deserved better. Damn right I did, Sarah muttered, tears burning her eyes. She glanced at the legal documents. They were a band-aid solution. Maybe it was an answer for the baby. Yet a single question lingered. Could William Donovan possibly be part of my life again? She didn't sign anything that day, telling Charles she needed time to think. William offered to call her a car, but she declined, wanting to walk back to the shelter to clear her head. He handed her a card with his personal cell number, the only item that felt remotely intimate. She left the grand building uncertain whether she was stepping toward salvation or heartbreak. That evening, Sarah returned to the shelter in a daze. She found Rebecca in the kitchen, dishing out bowls of soup to the residents. Feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her, Sarah pulled Rebecca aside and recounted the surreal encounter with William Donovan. She showed her the paperwork, baffling sums of money that could turn her life around. That's... Wow, Rebecca breathed, flipping through the pages. I've never seen so many zeros on a support agreement. She paused. So what are you going to do? Sarah sighed, sinking into a chair. I don't know. Part of me feels like taking this money is the only logical choice. The baby deserves a stable life, not a mother stuck in a shelter. But another part, she rubbed her belly. I'm scared he's just trying to buy off his conscience. If I sign, do I lose my dignity? Rebecca placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. It's not about dignity, Sarah. It's about providing for your child and yourself. You've sacrificed so much. You deserve some security. That doesn't mean you have to let him back in your life unless you want to." Those words calmed Sarah slightly, but her mind remained unsettled. She recalled her once blazing love with William, how they'd giggle over cheap pizza late at night, how she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder while he read his code aloud. Is that man still in there, beneath the polished millionaire facade, she wondered. A part of her yearned for closure or even a chance at reconciliation. But the hurt was fresh, the betrayal still raw. The baby's well-being, however, was paramount. That same night, she carefully reviewed the documents, scribbling notes and questions in the margins, wanting to ensure she wasn't signing away any rights inadvertently. If William was sincere in his remorse, maybe she could start by accepting financial support, then see if anything else could be salvaged later. She set the papers aside, resolved to meet with Charles again in a few days. Meanwhile, Sarah's new part-time receptionist job started. She commuted by bus, then hopped the subway to a modest building in Midtown, stepping into the small publishing house. The environment was busy, yet casual stacks of manuscripts, coffee mugs on every desk, editors arguing about grammar. On her first day, she answered phones, directed visitors, and fetched coffee for staff meetings. By lunchtime, she was exhausted, but a gentle wave of triumph swelled inside her. "I'm working. I'm making strides." During a brief break, she scrolled her phone and saw a new message from William. "Please let me know if you have any questions about the agreement. Also, I hope you're doing well." That was all. So formal, yet tinged with a cautious warmth. Sarah stared at the screen, unsure how to reply, eventually typing a short, "I'm still thinking. I'm safe. Thanks." She pressed send. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to focus on her tasks. Over the following week, she gradually came to a decision. She agreed to sign the financial support arrangement, but made it clear to Charles Whitmore in an email that she didn't want William controlling her life. She insisted on having her own apartment in her own name, a modest but comfortable place near the shelter, so she could remain in the supportive environment until she felt truly stable. She also wanted the freedom to make medical and personal decisions for the baby. If William truly wanted to be involved, they could discuss visitation and co-parenting later. To her astonishment, William agreed to all of it, no arguments. He forwarded a preliminary lease for a small 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, the rent fully paid for a year. Sarah felt a surge of relief. He's taking responsibility, she thought. Maybe there was a shred of the old William left. But was she ready for more than just a transactional arrangement? Late one night, cradling the phone, she impulsively dialed his personal number. He picked up immediately, sounding anxious. "Sarah." She swallowed. "I just wanted to say thank you," she managed, "for the help." Silence filled the line, then a soft exhale. "Of course. It's the least I can do." Her voice trembled. This baby, William, it's ours. He or she deserves 2 parents who at least respect each other." He murmured, "I'd like that. I'd like to earn your respect again. And maybe one day, your forgiveness." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She remembered how once, years ago, they could share entire nights, simply talking, dreaming. She had so many questions for him, why he abandoned her, what truly motivated his success, whether there was any love left. But for now, she whispered, "Good night, William," and ended the call. By the time Sarah was entering her 7th month of pregnancy, her life looked drastically different. With William's financial support, she moved into the small but cozy apartment. The walls were painted a cheerful cream color, and there was an extra room she planned to turn into a nursery. The furniture was minimal, just a sofa, a bed, and a kitchen table, but it was hers. Her name was on the lease. Her job at the publishing house had also become slightly more secure. The manager recognized her punctuality and diligence. They offered her an extended contract for another 3 months. With the baby coming, Sarah wasn't sure how long she could keep working, but at least she had some sense of purpose each day. She'd found a routine that made her feel human again. Wake up, check on emails, go to work, come home. Set aside half an hour to jot down story ideas and then rest. She still visited the shelter occasionally, volunteering to help with new arrivals, offering them a spark of hope in the same way Rebecca had done for her. One chilly afternoon, Sarah heard a knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find William standing there, holding a small bouquet of lilies and a bag of groceries. Her heart pounded as she took in his hesitant smile. "I was in the neighborhood," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by, if that's okay." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't told him her exact address Charles must have. She had been careful with boundaries, not wanting to feel controlled, but she found herself nodding, stepping aside to let him in. He handed her the flowers, which she placed in a vase on the kitchen table. "I brought some things," he said, lifting the grocery bag. "Fresh fruit, vitamins, and a new jacket for you. The weather's getting colder." The gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she managed, smoothing her hand over her growing belly. His eyes flicked to the apartment, taking in the bare walls and modest furnishings. "It's nice, cozy," he remarked, trying to fill the silence. He glanced at her abdomen again, then back at her face. "May I ask, do you know the baby's gender?" She shook her head. "I want it to be a surprise," she said softly. "That's wonderful." William looked down, fiddling with the bag. Finally, he exhaled. "Sarah, I know showing up like this might be too forward. I'm trying to respect your space, but I'd also like to be more involved. I want to help with the doctor appointments, the nursery, anything you need." She studied him, noticing a sincerity in his gaze that hadn't been there during their last tumultuous months together. Why the sudden change, she asked. She recalled the humiliating nights she spent on the streets, clinging to her coat for warmth, while he mingled with venture capitalists. William's shoulders sagged. "When I left, I was consumed by my ambition, believing I couldn't handle a relationship. I was terrified of failing. I did fail you in the worst way. Then once success arrived, I felt emptier than ever. All I had was money, status, and a hollow sense of accomplishment." He paused, voice raw. "I realize now that none of it matters, without love, without people who truly care about you. I guess I'm trying to atone for that. I can't change the past, but I can try to be here now." Tears prickled Sarah's eyes. The sincerity in his voice shook her. "I appreciate the honesty," she said slowly. She wondered if it was real or if guilt simply propelled him now that she was visibly pregnant and vulnerable. Yet a part of her, the part that remembered how they'd once dreamed side by side, wanted to believe him. "Would you like some tea?" she offered, gesturing to the kettle on the stove. He nodded gratefully. The two of them settled at the tiny kitchen table, sipping tea amidst the silence. The city traffic hummed outside. Neither knew how to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage in one afternoon, but at least they were there, trying. After a while, William cleared his throat. "I'd like to take you to your next prenatal appointment," he said. "If you'll let me. I can drive or we can get a car. Whatever you prefer." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That would be nice." Deep down, a small flicker of warmth lit her heart, something akin to hope. William accompanied Sarah to her next prenatal appointment at Bellevue Hospital. Miss Francis, the shelter nurse who volunteered there, greeted them warmly, but Sarah noticed the curious glances from staff members. She imagined they recognized William. His face was plastered across business headlines. Yet to his credit, he didn't flaunt his status. He simply held Sarah's coat while she changed into a gown and asked the doctor thoughtful questions about the baby's development. They heard the baby's heartbeat again, steady and reassuring. William's expression softened, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. A powerful wave of emotion struck her. It was the first tangible moment she realized he truly cared about the child. On their way out, he placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her through the bustling hallway. She allowed the small gesture, longing for closeness, yet keeping her guard up. In the hospital lobby, they unexpectedly bumped into a familiar face, Barbara Donovan Williams' mother. Her short silver hair was styled elegantly, and she wore a designer coat. She froze upon spotting her son with Sarah. "William," she exclaimed. Then her gaze flicked to Sarah's round belly, and her eyes narrowed. "I heard rumors, but I thought you two were done." Sarah instinctively braced herself. She recalled the tension with her mother-in-law, who never quite warmed to her. Barbara had always found subtle ways to criticize Sarah's family background and modest means. She also blamed Sarah for distracting William from more important ambitions. William squared his shoulders. "Mother, this is Sarah. My wife. She's pregnant with our child." Barbara's lips pressed into a thin line. "So you're reconciling?" she asked, voice laced with disapproval. Sarah couldn't hold back. "I wouldn't call it that," she said quietly. "We're trying to figure things out, at least for the baby's sake." Barbara sniffed disdainfully. "William, you have far too many responsibilities to let old mistakes drag you down." She eyed Sarah as if she were an intruder. "Why didn't you tell him you were pregnant sooner?" A flame of anger rose in Sarah. "I tried. He left, and I had no way to reach him. And trust me, I wouldn't call carrying your grandchild a mistake." William gently took his mother's arm. "Enough, Mother. The baby is my responsibility, and I won't have you speak to Sarah that way. We're not discussing this here in a hospital lobby." Barbara sniffed again. "We'll talk later, William." She glared at Sarah with thinly veiled contempt, then turned on her heel and walked away. Heart-pounding, Sarah noticed people staring. She blinked back, tears, humiliated by the confrontation. William's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry." "She had no right to talk to you like that," he said softly. But Sarah's mind raced. She recalled how Barbara had once told her she wasn't good enough for William, that he needed a partner more on his level. Now wealthy and successful, William's family clearly saw Sarah as an obstacle. "It's fine," she muttered, though her trembling hands said otherwise. "I'll manage." They walked outside, the crisp air hitting their faces. William turned to her. "Please don't let her get to you. She doesn't speak for me." Sarah found her resolve. "I won't. But if we're going to co-parent, I need to know you'll stand by me, not be swayed by your mother's opinions." He nodded, eyes earnest. "I promise." Though his promise felt genuine, Sarah couldn't ignore the chill left by the confrontation. She remembered the nights when William's mother belittled her for dreaming of being a writer, for lacking financial security. Would that negativity poison their child's life too? Or had William grown enough to shield his new family from it? Only time would tell. On the drive back to Sarah's apartment, the tension was palpable. William tried to make small talk about the baby's due date, about nursery decor, but Sarah was lost in her thoughts. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admitted quietly, "My mother was always controlling. Part of why I left was because I felt suffocated by her expectations, by the pressure of success. I let that overshadow you and me. I'm sorry." Sarah clutched her seatbelt. "What's done is done," she said, voice steady. "Let's just focus on the future, on doing right by this baby. That's all that matters." Inside, though, her emotions churned. Could we really have a future together, she wondered? Or is it just going to be co-parenting with a man I once loved? At her apartment, he walked her to the door. "Call me if you need anything," he said softly. She nodded, uncertain if she'd ever be ready to let him fully back into her life. The final weeks of Sarah's pregnancy arrived with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Her belly felt enormous, every movement an effort. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a blend of excitement and anxiety about the impending birth. William visited regularly, bringing supplies, maternity clothes, organic food, baby items. They spoke about practicalities, pediatricians, childcare options, possible names. Yet the question of their relationship remained unresolved. At times, they fell into an unexpected closeness, sharing a laugh at a tiny onesie with silly prints reminiscing about their college days. In those moments, Sarah glimpsed the man she fell in love with, his eyes warm and tender. But the memory of abandonment always lurked. She couldn't easily forget sleeping on sidewalks, shivering in the winter cold, all while he soared to stardom. Trust would not be rebuilt overnight. One evening she typed away at a short story, her old passion for writing rekindling, when a gentle knock came at the door. She opened it to find William in casual clothes holding a large container of homemade soup. "You mentioned in passing that you craved chicken soup," he said, smiling sheepishly. "I asked my personal chef to make a batch." "Don't worry, I didn't cook it myself. That would be disastrous." Sarah's laughter slipped out before she could stop it. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." He set the container down, noticing her manuscript drafts scattered across the table. "Are you writing again?" She blushed, nodding. "Just trying to get the creative juices flowing. Something for me, you know, to find myself again." He asked if he could read a snippet. She hesitated, then allowed him. He read quietly, eyes darting across the page. When he finished, he looked up, an admiring expression on his face. "This is really good," he said softly. "I forgot how talented you are." She swallowed, her heart fluttering. He was praising her, not dismissing her efforts as frivolous, like he once had. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked about the story about a lone traveler who finds hope in unexpected places. The conversation flowed naturally, reminiscent of their younger selves. At one point, he gently placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. A shared smile passed between them, something both tender and uncertain. Later that night, as he left, she lingered at the door. "William," she said softly, "I just want you to know. I see you trying. I appreciate it." He exhaled, relief washing over his face. "I'll keep trying, Sarah." But the next day, chaos returned. William called her in a panic, asking her to watch the news. Another business scandal had broken out, accusations that Donovan Enterprises engaged in questionable stock trading. Rumors swirled that William's mother, Barbara, had been pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating backdoor deals. William's name was splashed across headlines with tabloids, speculating about the moral integrity of his entire operation. Sarah flipped on her old TV set, seeing reporters swarm in front of Donovan Enterprises. A few sensationalist channels displayed a picture of Sarah from months ago, claiming she was the estranged wife carrying the heir to a troubled empire. She felt nauseous. Was she about to be dragged into the public eye? William texted, "I'm sorry. This is out of control. I never wanted you to be involved." She fought the urge to panic, but the stress weighed heavily, and within hours, mild contractions started. She was only 36 weeks along, a bit early, but still within a safe range. The contractions weren't severe yet, but she felt them enough to know her body might be preparing for labor. She called Miss Francis, who advised her to rest and hydrate, warning her to come to the hospital if things intensified. Night descended, and the tabloids kept spewing stories. A photo of Barbara, stern-faced, refused to speak to reporters. They insinuated that William's entire fortune could be at risk. Sarah tried not to care about money, but she worried about the baby. If Donovan Enterprises collapsed under scandal, would her child be caught in the crossfire of a messy public fiasco? When William arrived at her apartment, he looked drained, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry for the media circus," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I had no idea my mother was involved in shady trades. I've fired the people responsible, but the damage is done." Sarah tried to remain calm, but the Braxton Hicks contractions flared, causing her to wince. William noticed immediately fear flashing across his features. "Are you okay? I think—" She paused, breathing through the discomfort. "I might be in early labor." His face paled, and in that moment, all talk of scandal and business melted away. "Let's get you to the hospital," he said gently, helping her gather her things. As they hurried out, Sarah realized a new chapter was beginning. Whatever storms raged outside, she was about to bring a child into the world, and she needed William's unwavering support. Inside the maternity wing at Bellevue Hospital, time seemed to slip into a blur of fluorescent lights, medical chatter, and waves of pain. Sarah was admitted with mild contractions that by midnight turned fierce. William stayed by her side, gripping her hand through each surge. Sweating and trembling, Sarah alternated between tears and focused breathing, clinging to the promise that soon she'd hold her baby. It was a tumultuous night. At one point, the baby's heart rate dipped slightly, prompting quick action from the medical staff. Fear stabbed through Sarah. She locked eyes with William, seeing raw terror reflected there. In that moment, all bitterness faded, replaced by the realization that they both desperately wanted their child to be safe. The baby's heartbeat stabilized, and relief flowed. Hours crawled by. Finally, near dawn, Sarah felt the overwhelming urge to push. Nurses coached her, encouraging her to bear down. She felt like every muscle in her body was on fire. William murmured supportive words, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. With a final guttural cry, she felt the release of pain and the sudden miraculous wail of new life. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming newborn. A rush of emotions seized Sarah. Love, relief, awe. She reached out trembling arms as they placed the baby on her chest. Shocked by the warmth of that tiny body, tears streamed down Sarah's face. William's eyes glistened too, a rare vulnerability she'd never seen in him before. "Welcome to the world," Sarah whispered, voice choked, pressing a kiss to the baby's wet forehead. The little girl quieted, opening her eyes for a brief second, as if trying to focus on her mother's face. Later they moved Sarah to a recovery room. William remained close, pacing the hallway, on calls to his legal team, but always returning to check on Sarah and the baby. He smiled whenever he saw them together, as though the world outside, with all its scandal and drama, had lost its power here. Barbara tried to visit, but Sarah requested only William and the medical staff be allowed in. She wasn't ready to confront her mother-in-law. Not yet. Meanwhile, word arrived that the scandal at Donovan Enterprises was being resolved. William had stepped forward, taking responsibility for corporate oversight lapses and cooperating with regulators. He was determined to repair the damage rather than hide. 2 days passed in the hospital, a whirlwind of feeding diaper changes and exhausted naps. Sarah watched William hold their daughter, marveling at how gently he cradled her. They hadn't formally picked a name. Sarah had 6 favorites. While gazing into her daughter's round, curious eyes, she decided on Hope. It felt fitting. This tiny baby was the embodiment of new beginnings. When discharge day came, William insisted on driving them to Sarah's apartment. He carefully carried the car seat, setting it up by the living room couch. Sarah gently unbuckled Hope, lifting her close. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet apartment, the hush broken only by soft baby sighs. "I want to make a pledge," William said, voice low. "To be here for you and Hope, always. I know I can't erase the past, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make our future better." Sarah gazed at him, then at Hope. Her heart brimmed with a kaleidoscope of emotions: uncertainty, gratitude, a cautious desire to heal. "It won't be easy," she murmured. "We have a lot to work through, but I'd like to try." He exhaled relief, flooding his features. "We'll go at your pace. Whatever you need." She nodded, tears glimmering. Over his shoulder, she saw a reflection in the window herself, William and Hope in his arms, forming a fragile family portrait. Perhaps fate had brought them full circle. The child they created now bound them with a love that neither betrayal nor success could sever. For weeks they navigated those uncharted waters. William balanced corporate responsibilities with fatherhood, often losing track of time as he admired his sleeping daughter. Sarah slowly let her guard down, recognizing that while forgiveness would be a journey, she didn't have to walk it alone anymore. Each day, she felt stronger. Each day, baby Hope grew a reminder that life could emerge triumphant, even from heartbreak. Whether or not Sarah and William's relationship would fully mend remained to be seen. But for the first time, she believed in second chances. In a world as unpredictable as theirs, one truth shone clear: love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. And so, from the frigid sidewalks of homelessness to the gentle warmth of a newfound family, Sarah and William's story shows that life rarely unfolds as expected, but hope can spark miracles. Their journey reminds us that every hardship carries the seed of possibility, and every broken bond can mend with genuine remorse, forgiveness, and perseverance. Thank you for joining me in this emotional roller coaster of heartache, redemption, and rebirth.